You certainly have to stay very focused, and the next guy up here is always focused, always dialed in. He's Rick Morris from the FDH Lounge. He does a national internet show based out of Cleveland. A good friend of mine, good friend of the program. He's on the Comcast Business Hotline right now. Rick, how you doing, my friend? Welcome to the show.
Joe, thank you so much as always. Great honor to be on with you. And to show you how focused I am, I caught in your little promo coming in here. You got the Sixers and the Warriors tonight? I'll tell you what, from the North Coast, take them out for us, man. Put some bruises on them Warriors.
Well, we'll do our best. We'll do our best. We'll try to hook you guys up a little bit. We're gonna talk a little Cavs today as well. I can't wait to get to them. But let's talk a little Eagles. I know, and as I mentioned, you're based out of Cleveland, and you've had all the lumps and bumps you can handle with the passing over of some quarterbacks. Hugh Jackson and the like, allowing us to draft Carson Wentz, and you've watched him from afar now. Your thoughts? His second year is when you're watching him, Rick. And I got to ask you this because I know you're a big Cleveland guy. You're watching it, trying to be objective about it, but does it also make it hard to swallow when you watch him do some of the things he's doing and say, "Hey, this guy could have been a Cleveland Brown"?
Yes and no. I mean, from my perspective, to be honest with you, I really thought the guy out of those two guys was Jared Goff last year, and I was very bitter when we didn't get the top pick. And then Carson Wentz, I knew could really become something. I knew this was possible. I don't know how likely I thought this was. So for me personally, I can't go back and say, oh, I called it all along, because I didn't. And for the people who did call it all along, and I know some who did, I think it's even worse for them because they saw this coming. And you and I have often talked about the links between Philly and Cleveland, the odd ones. It's basically bizarro world now. Number 1 and number 32 in the league right now with our respective teams. And so looking at the Eagles, who really can't seem to do anything wrong right about now, you look at Carson Wentz developing as he has in year 2, and you put the question to your listeners today about, getting into it, believing it, really throwing yourself into it, and feeling like anything is possible. And I really think from afar, anything is possible. And again, because your city and my city have a lot in common in terms of having a chip on our shoulders, people might take this the wrong way. But one of the things I think works in your favor is this kind of feels like a little bit of a down year for the league. The Patriots have only intermittently looked like the Patriots. The Falcons are still one of the most talented teams in the league, and they're a mess. Seahawks just lost Richard Sherman. There's been an epidemic of megastars going down. And yes, you guys have lost Jason Peters. I don't mean to act like you're exempt from that either. But the league kind of feels like it's down. Scoring was down, especially early on. There were some great analytic articles about offensive line play being somewhat off around the league this year, partially due to off-season workouts and that kind of stuff, teams not being able to get in rhythm. The good news for you guys is I think the league will be up next year, but you guys will be as well. This team looks like, again, don't take this the wrong way. You hate comparisons, I know, the Cowboys. There's a little bit of 92 Cowboys to this team when I see it. You're not quite as young, but you do have potentially as bright a future as the 92 Cowboys from here on in. So even if the league is up next year, so too should your Eagles be.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, Rick. You said they're not quite as young. You're right about that because the Cowboys, I mean, they were in their embryonic years, and they just went from 1-15 to boom. They won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. So if I'm looking at the triplets, the Eagles version of the triplets, you have Wentz, you have Aikman. Sure, you have you could pick one of the wide receivers. Maybe it doesn't kind of get to the level of a Dez Bryant, but there are some wide receivers the Eagles have that certainly are serviceable ones. Can Jay Ajayi be the new guy they picked up from Miami? Can he be a marquee back for this offense?
He can, and I'll tell you what, again, this is one of these funny things. A lot of us out there have a 1B team that we root for, and for me, that's always been Miami. So I'm a little bit angry about that. Giving away for a 4th-round pick.
Right.
Adam Gase drinking his own bathwater about being an offensive genius at this point, I'm afraid. You guys got him basically for nothing. You put him in there with Blunt, who is a guy who has really always been underrated as far as his capacity to carry an offense at various points in time. You have both of these guys there together. That makes you extra dangerous. Like you said, this receiving core is kind of deep right now. You bring in somebody like Alshon Jeffrey. You expect big things out of him, but Nelson Aguilar showing a pulse and even exceeding that has got to be a nice surprise for a lot of people.
Sure.
So you know, this team is just really rolling at this point, and it's fun for me to watch from afar. Much like what you've said about the Cavs, you're happy for me watching it happen. I'm happy for you, Joe, watching this from afar. This has got to be a fun team to root for, and I'll tell you what, if I lived in Philly, if I was an Eagles fan, every week I think I'd be rocking the Green Man outfit watching the game.
Well, it has been fun. I got to tell you, Rick, it has been fun. But for many years, I mean, we felt like you do now with your Browns team this year. We haven't felt like your Cavs team has felt with our basketball team in a while. I guess we're getting there with that. But because we talk about Cleveland all the time, and I know there's some jokes thrown Cleveland's way about and thank you letters to Hugh Jackson or whatever for not taking Carson Wentz and for allowing him to go to the Eagles. But seriously, though, because then the next year, you guys take Myles Garrett instead of possibly taking Deshaun Watson. I know the Chiefs traded up for Patrick Mahomes. So he was another guy that might have been available. And the record is what it is for Hugh Jackson. I think it's like 1-24, 1-23 since he's been there. But guys haven't found that quarterback yet. Now, how come he chose to pass, do you think, over some potential quarterbacks? It could have been real franchise-changing quarterbacks. And what do you think the future is for him? And what do you think the future is for Browns? And where are they going to get their next quarterback?
Well, it's because it's a mess between him and the front office. Everybody says they're on the same page, but they're not. So ultimately, it depends on which weeks you choose to believe as far as what happened, why. Deshaun Watson this year, by the way, was a guy that I wanted, and I was screeching when this team traded out at 12. And I hate to say I told you so on that one, but yeah, he got hurt. If anybody wants to throw that in my face and act like he's injury-prone, I think you'd be reaching. Deshaun Watson showed that he's a franchise quarterback. He'll show it when he comes back. This Browns team, I'll tell you what, the decade under Randy Werner, it was about as pathetic as any franchise has ever had. Jimmy Haslam comes in and says, hold my beer, because the last couple of years have been so much worse even than the Randy Werner years. You look at a year like this year, I was aggravated at a lot of the national coverage coming into this year, although I have to eat crow, because they upgraded the offensive line. They brought in Greg Williams. The defense has been much better as I anticipated, although if you look at the stat sheet, not nearly as great as they are on paper. Mark Twain would love this defense. Lies, damn lies, and statistics. I mean, this is a defense that's got Jabril Peppers lined up halfway to Cedar Point sometimes when he's playing safety. I swear to God, he's closer to the line of scrimmage when he's returning punts than when he's playing safety. So the defensive side of the ball hasn't been perfect, but it's been a lot better. But everyone in the national media said, oh, same old Browns, which to me is not a take. That offends me more as an analyst than as a Browns fan, because it's not scientific at all. But you know what? The unscientific take is right twice a day. I stand corrected. This team is guilty until proven innocent. It doesn't matter how many great things they do in the offseason, spend money, upgrade the offensive line. It doesn't matter. I swear to God, everybody loses 50 IQ points when they walk in that facility. This team has had people that have had very good reputations walking in there in recent years, not least of which a gentleman by the name of Mike Holmgren. But nobody can do anything right as soon as they get in there. It is pathetic. You look at the misuse and neglect of Duke Johnson, who was the best offensive weapon on the team this year. I'm reminded of those skeleton memes about waiting for such and such to happen. Hugh Jackson keeps saying, he's going to be our Gio Bernard. Well, I might be that scarecrow out in the field, basically waiting for that to happen in terms of getting him the ball. They just can't seem to do anything right. The front office, Sashi Brown and his slide rule approach to making things happen, and this A.J. McCarron trade that almost happened. First of all, everybody in town is in accord on that one. An awful trade. It never should have happened, but it's an embarrassment that it gets out that the Browns blew it. It's like there are bad teams all over the league, right, all the time. Do you have to humiliate us by being a dumpster fire on a regular basis? This team is so much more humiliating than even the record alone, and they have one win in the last season and a half, Joe, so what does that tell you?
No, I feel for you. I can hear it coming through when you're speaking and when you're telling these stories. The frustration, Rick. Let me ask you. I mean, do you share the same sentiments as the fans? Is it that bad of a situation, or is it just okay? Well, the baseball season's around the corner. We'll look to that. I mean, is it how do the Browns fans get through it?
Well, I think, honestly, just by looking at the other two sports teams that I try to do, because there's not a lot to complain about when you look there. And speaking of which, when compiling this front office, And this goes back to the bad days under Mark Shapiro, the days in the desert with the Indians. You know, I used to pray for Paul DePodesta to come to town and become a general manager here. I never thought I had to specify to God what sport I was talking about. I thought he would understand I meant baseball. He comes into the freaking Browns to work with Sashi Brown and this whole slide rule analytics thing. Analytics is fine as a tool. I'm not going to be one of these know-nothing mouth breathers that dashes analytics. But much like with Sam Hinkie in your town with the process, you have to be elastic. You have to bend to different things here. And I think Hinkie got into trouble because he wouldn't bend from we're going to be as bad as we can be as long as we can be. And that leads to guys like Okafor getting ruined by the bad scenarios, much like Clipperitis used to happen back in the day where every talented player there would be destroyed by the atmosphere. Same thing with the Browns. It's one thing to talk in a vacuum about we're going to suffer through a couple of bad years, strip it down to the studs. This is what reality looks like, people. It's pretty toxic, and nobody is ever going to want to come here. I would say fire Hugh Jackson, fire the front office, but who with any credibility is going to take Jimmy Haslam's money, no matter how much it is?
Wow, that is a certainly an indictment on the situation there, you know. But like you said, Rick, and we're talking with Rick Morris from the FDH Lounge, hosts a national internet radio show, and a good friend of mine, good friend of the program. Appreciate you coming on today, Rick. Let's talk about the other teams. Well, let's talk about the other team first in your town because I want to relate it to the 76ers. Cleveland Cavaliers. Obviously, they are the bright spot, one of the bright spots in your town. You have the Indians and Terry Francona and all that. So off to a 5-7 start. Heading into yesterday, the Celtics have now won 11 games after an 0-2 start. Cleveland struggling a little bit out of the gate, whereas the Celtics did, and then they got it together. Is it all about Kyrie Irving? Is that the whole disparity in the records there? Is it all about Kyrie Irving, and how did Kyrie get away?
Well, that's part of it, certainly. And again, Kyrie occupies, I would say, a unique spot in the history of this town because under other circumstances, for a guy to pull what he pulled and leave just on an ego move because LeBron gets the spotlight and I don't, obviously, we'd all be kidney punching him until the end of time. He is also the guy who won Game 7 of the NBA Finals for us with that shot and ended 52 years of misery. So as much as I'd like to hate on the guy, it's almost like a half-hate, I think, as it is for a lot of people. But as far as it goes, with the Cavs right now, you look at this roster. This is almost a necessary humbling at this point in time. Now, this humbling may go too far, but this is a roster where if this was a video game, and it was like, we're going to have the best version of LeBron, which could be now, quite frankly, based on the way he's playing, but the best version of Dwayne Wade, Derrick Rose, etc. This team wouldn't go 73-9. This team would go 78-4. But those guys don't exist anymore. We don't have the 2011 version of Dwayne Wade or anything like that. These are all the 2017 versions. And these guys came in here, and make no mistake about it, Dwayne Wade came in here expecting to start. People criticized Ty Lue for starting when he knew it was a bad idea, but he had to let it play out. And we're at the spot now where it is a necessary humbling. Everybody has to understand what their role is going to be going forward here. If the goal is for this team to win a championship, truly, then everybody is going to have to embrace their roles, diminished though they may be, and you're going to have to step aside sometimes and make room for some other guys. You may or may not have caught this in the national game on TNT the other night. Jeff Green, who is somebody that I've been touting for a little while since we signed him, had a breakout game. And I'm not saying that you're going to see that version of Jeff Green all the time, but in the finals against Golden State, which I still think is coming, he is going to be a key piece to matching up with Golden State if there is going to be a return to 2016.
Interesting stuff, my friend. All right, well, let me ask you this. You watched a lot of the Sixers, I'm sure, because you're a big basketball guy. You know about the process. Yep. You mentioned Sam Hinkie before. Sixers got off to a slow start, 1-4, but and they're missing Markelle Fultz, their top pick overall. But what do you see from the Sixers? And listen, we talked about this when we were on your show the other night in terms of teams building and how going through the process, not just the Sixers and other teams. We talked about how Cleveland did a little bit and how they built themselves up. You see the Sixers being one of those teams, because a lot of teams try. It doesn't always work. Do you think the Sixers are closer to be one of those teams to making this thing work, or the other way?
Absolutely, man. If I'm looking at a team for the next 5 to 10 years, anywhere around the league, and yeah, maybe Golden State for the near term. I guess maybe you take them out of the mix. But if you're talking about anybody other than Golden State, I take Philadelphia, quite frankly. And I think Boston is a little bit overinflated right now, as they have been the last couple of years, albeit I think the model Boston is using now works better than the way it worked last year. where they had too many guys playing disparate positions. Boston
Sure.
at least has a more developed roster right now. But you guys, in my estimation, medium to long term, are ahead of them. I think it's going to be you guys. It's going to be Milwaukee in there with the Greek Freak. I think it's going to be Orlando with the way they've played early on without even getting much from Jonathan Isaac yet. But you guys are going to be in the mix for as far as the eye can see in the Eastern Conference. And, I mean, it's hard as a Cavs fan to say I envy just about anybody, but medium to long term, I actually do envy you guys.
And so the process, in your opinion, serves its purpose. And since you guys kind of had to go through that, whether, there was I guess there's a difference in intentionally tanking games, tanking seasons or not, but the process can work.
It can work, but again, I think whether you're talking the Browns, whether you're talking the Sixers, it has to be measured with reality. You're not doing this in a science lab. This is not in a vacuum. It's in the real world. And there's a real toxicity to being that bad for that long. People aren't going to want to come and be a part of your team as that happens. People who are otherwise smart and rational people in the coaching staff and the front office will freak out. Sam Hinkie, I think, he had the right idea, broadly speaking. But I think what caught up to him in the end was he didn't seem to, I think, from the outside looking in, be as concerned about the toxicity of having that bad of a team for that long.
Yep.
And that he wouldn't bend on, even if we do, quote-unquote, risk winning a few more games in the short term, it's something that we have to do just so that we have something on the other side that people are going to want to be a part of. So it's an approach that works, and you and I talked about this on my show the other day in terms of the World Series. Cubs, Astros the last 2 years, the Royals before them. It does work. Blackhawks in hockey. Sometimes you have to bottom out and get the draft pick.
Yep.
You clear out your roster space and your cap space, but you have to do it the right way. It's very scientific in how you approach it.
Well, Rick, let me ask you before I let you go. So because the Eagles look like they're in a position to make, to do things the right way. They've done it the right way. They seem like they're in a position to make their run. Do you see the window because of what you mentioned earlier in the show, and I've talked about this earlier in the show because of the things that have happened. Your Aaron Rodgers is down, your Richard Sherman's down, your Zeke's serving the suspension. How big is the window for the Eagles? Is it kind of this year, or do you see this being, because it's this year and it might be small and it might be this big, it's a finite size, but is it going to be a long-term thing with this team, do you think, because of the infrastructure around them? Or is it just, hey, you got to get it now because things are falling into place and you never know when the chance will come back again?
No, I think the window is going to stay open, and here's the thing, too. Here's what should frustrate all the other teams around the league, not least of which my Browns, and looking at your Eagles. Twice in the last decade, people forget this nationally. You guys have had to dig out from some horrific cap situations. That year, what was it, 2012, I think, when you tried to put together the best team in the league on paper.
Dream team.
And it all fell apart. Yeah, the dream team. And then subsequently, when Chip Kelly was actually given full control, you guys did the same thing.
Yep.
And again, credit to Howie Roseman and everybody in the front office. You guys have shown that it can be done. You don't have to necessarily bottom out. Those are two situations where you would have looked at it like, okay, prolonged rebuild on the way. But you guys, twice in the last decade, less than a decade, just over a half decade, have bypassed this. It can be done. You guys are going to have to retool to stay at the top, but you've shown twice that you've tackled and achieved bigger challenges than what you have in front of you. The future is very bright for you guys.
Rick, it's always bright for you as well, my friend. Appreciate you coming on, taking the time. Great stuff on the Browns and the Eagles, Sixers, and whatnot. We'll have you on again soon, hopefully, and we'll catch you down the road. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the games today, tomorrow. We'll catch up with you soon, pal. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. It's one of the finest shows anywhere. Always a pleasure, my friend.
Thanks, Rick. Always appreciate the kind words. We'll catch up with you soon, pal. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, you too, Rick. Rick Morris from the FDH Lounge.